It's a beautiful Friday, the 30th of June 2023. We are counting down to 2023. If you have tuned in to Camnet TV, this is a breakfast show, a show that comes to your screen every morning. And today on a Friday, we are discussing a very important topic. We know a lot has happened between last week and this week. And of course, a lot of stakeholders have continued to talk and comment on the issues, of debt restructuring, this elephant in the room. What is it about? How does it benefit the economy? Yesterday, we did see the Ministry of Finance and the Economics Association of Zambia hold a meeting where they were unbundling some of the issues concerned in the debt restructuring process. And of course, if you're watching me this morning on Camnet TV, you are alive. You are alive, and we've counted down to the half of 2023. So 2023 today will be done, and moving on, we are going into a new month. Those aspirations that you wrote down, I'm sure by now you should start marking, because we have gone half a year into 2023, and it is something also to be grateful to God, because you are alive and being counted among the living. This morning I am your host, Prudence Chota, and I look forward to having a wonderful discussion, deliberation, and of course having this program with you. Remember, when we are instead having this program and you are tuning in and listening, we are having a conversation. Those messages, keep them coming on our Facebook page. You can write us a message, leave us a message, leave the comment. Unfortunately, today I'm being informed our phone lines might not be working. We might be unable to get to you if you try to call us. But hey, that should not deter us from having a conversation. Just go to our Facebook page. This program is also being streamed live. You can send us that message and we can get to conversate. So this is a breakfast show this morning, unbundling the debt restructuring deal. What does it mean for Zambia? That and others on the breakfast show this morning. So right about now, before I bore you with a lot of talking, let's to go into our health corner to see what is it that the doctor has for us. Remember, you too can be part of the conversation by sending us those topics you would like the doctor to tackle, and we will be able to forward them to the doctor. And when they come on the program, they will be able to talk about certain kind of conditions, illnesses, and things that we encounter in our everyday life. Sometimes we do encounter those things, we don't even realize that we have a problem. So doctor is here to give us tips. Remember, these are not diagnostics or diagnosis, the way you say it in the medical term, but these are just tips on how you can go about these certain illnesses and conditions. So Camnet cares for you. That's why we also bring you the health corner, where you conversate with the doctor. So this morning, let's see what the doctor has in store for us.
Hi, I'm glad that you could join us today on the breakfast show on the health corner, as we are talking about asthma. This week we've been talking about asthma, and we say that asthma is a chronic inflammatory disease that affects the airways, and usually it causes a hyperresponsiveness in the airways that usually leads to somebody having shortness of breath, difficulties breathing, and also having this chest tightness in the chest, and sometimes they would have a cough that would be progressive, and it comes about suddenly. And the other thing is that they would have a wheezing sound when they are breathing, when they're having the asthmatic attack. So today we'll talk about diagnosis and treatment. Usually in the hospital, asthma is diagnosed clinically. By that, we mean that just by hearing from the patient how the symptoms began, and also listening to the chest of the patient, we'll be able to assess to say somebody is in an asthmatic attack. And this is followed by treatment, very aggressive treatment, to try and relieve the patient from the asthmatic attack that they are in. So usually there are some medications that I use to treat the asthmatic attack in that moment, and these are medications that can be either mostly we use inhalers. So would use some inhalers that the patient will be able to use in that moment and relieve the airways. So relieve the blockages in the airways and the narrowing of the airways. So we use some inhalers that contain certain medications that are used to treat the asthma. So we have certain medications such as salbutamol, which usually is prescribed in the hospital, and this is a common medication for asthmatic patients who need to be put on this inhaler so that they can be able to relieve their symptoms as quickly as possible. So patients who have asthma will need to go home when they're out of the asthmatic attack. Then they can be sent home on the inhaler. So the inhaler can be used at any point when they're having the asthmatic attack. Other times there are patients who have very severe asthma, and in these patients they would probably need certain other medications such as steroids that would help to relieve them from the symptoms that they are feeling. Now, these steroids are not to be taken for a very prolonged period, so it's only for a short period of time and then you stop. These are not used. These are not to be used for a very long time because they have very bad side effects. They have side effects that are not good for the body, and so we try to minimize the use of these steroids. But if it's a patient who has asthma and they need to be we need to prevent them from having these asthmatic attacks very often, then we'll put them on some steroids as well. So those are some of the medications that are used to treat asthma. There are other medications as well that are not so common in our country or in our setting, but they can also be found in certain pharmacies and certain hospitals as well. So if you have any other questions, if you need to know more about asthma, you can reach out to me on Facebook at Dr. Nakubyanamfire. And if you want to watch any of the other videos, you can watch them on YouTube at Dr. Nakubyanamfire. Make sure you watch tomorrow again, as we'll be talking about how you can prevent yourself from getting an asthmatic attack. And also invite your friends and your family as well. I'll see you again tomorrow. Stay blessed and stay healthy.
There you have it. That was the doctor today giving us tips on asthma. Asthma, for those who are asthmatic, they do relate with what the doctor was actually talking about. Those who are living with these conditions, it's not the end of the road for you. You can still have a normal life and live a normal lifestyle. The only thing that is important is following some of these tips that the doctors keep giving us on the breakfast show. This is Camnet TV, where we care for you, the viewer. That's why we do bring you that segment of the Health Corner, where you can learn about some of these things. A very important aspect there. Thank you, Dr. Mfire, for all those tips about those who have asthma and how you can prevent having asthmatic attacks. Very important there. Even right about now also, we are going to look at the money market. How is it that our local currency is performing against other major convertibles? I know this aspect of debt restructuring, since its announcement, we are expecting to see some fundamentals in the economy begin to behave differently, and the local currency is one of those we are expecting to see it begin to appreciate. So this morning, let's see how is it that our local currency is performing, or is it maybe that it is waiting for the private creditors to also give Zambia a deal? We are not sure, but hey, that's how it looks like as of today, the 30th of June 2023 at 0717. The kwacha against the Great British Pound was buying at 21 kwacha 82 ngwe, and selling at 22 kwacha 25 ngwe. The Zambian kwacha against the euro was buying at 18 kwacha 83 ngwe and selling at 18 kwacha 20 ngwe. The Zambian kwacha against the South African rand is buying at 0.92 ngwe and selling at 0.94 ngwe. The Zambian kwacha against the United States dollar is buying at 17 kwacha 32 ngwe and selling at 17 kwacha 66 ngwe. That is the money market for this morning. Kwacha, they are trending around 17 kwacha to a US dollar and 0.92 to South African rand. I've mentioned these two currencies because I know they are the ones we usually trade with. Remember, we do trade a lot with South Africa. Almost everything, not everything, but almost all the goods that sometimes we import into Zambia, we do import from South Africa and from China. If you talk about some of the clothes that you see around when you go to Komesa, to Kamwala, when you go to Kitwe, you go to Ndola, most of those are coming from either South Africa or the Republic of China. Then also we do import fruits from South Africa. So if you go Kuja, Soweto Kuja, you'll find a lot of trucks that have come in with fruits and potatoes. All those are coming from South Africa and we are importing things from there. So looking at the way kwacha is performing against South Africa, we can say we are doing better, but we can even do better than that. But as it stands, kwacha is slightly doing better than the South African rand. Then also we've seen against the United States dollar trending around 17 kwacha, something in way. But we do expect our local currency to perform even better as we have reached a debt restructuring deal with the international creditors. We are hoping the private creditors can also come on board and give us a relief. But I know you might be wondering the jargons I'm using, bilateral creditors, private creditors. What are we talking about here? This is why we brought you this breakfast show where we will be unbundling some of these issues. When we talk about the bilateral creditors, the ones, of course, who've given us an extension for the 6.3 billion US dollar we owe to them, you might ask a question and say, who are these bilateral creditors? Then we've also got what we are calling the private creditors that government is yet to engage. Remember, we also owe them about 6.8 billion and we need that debt to be restructured. Yesterday, though, the Minister of Finance, or rather the Secretary to Cabinet, the Secretary to the Treasury, Felix Nkulukusa, did say something about what we expect from private creditors. He did say we are expecting an haircut. But journalists, when you say haircut, what do you mean? Even that we will be discussing in studio. But what the Secretary to the Treasury said yesterday is that from the private creditors, we are expecting them to cut at least the debts that we have, so that you pay us what is remaining. And he said Zambia will be able to do that if at all we do receive an haircut. Quite interesting, quite interesting. So that were some of the fundamentals and the highlights of the meeting that the Ministry of Finance did have yesterday with the Economics Association of Zambia. That story will be zooming in later before we do allow the guests to settle, because that also pertains to what we are discussing this morning. But what about now? Also, we know a few months ago the country was set ablaze when news that 13 girls who were abducted were discovered in a house in Lusaka's Chalala area. We've seen quite some aspects that have been happening with regards to that particular story. And of course, yesterday, finally yesterday, the two abductors were sentenced to 650 years in prison. In short, they were sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after serving half of their sentence. When they say parole, meaning you can be eligible to come out of prison after you serve half of your sentence. But you know, they've been sentenced to 650 years. Half of 650, if my calculation says me well, it's about 325 years. And has anyone lived that long? So of course, they've been sentenced to life in prison. They will have to spend the rest of their lives in prison for abducting the 13 girls, for raping them. You know, there is a lot that happened, a lot of trauma. Though we have a lot of questions with regards to this particular story that, of course, we will try to make follow-ups. Did the two guys act alone? Who was helping them? Who was funding them? Because these two who've been arrested, I don't even think they were working. But the question we were asking is, who was funding these guys? What really happened? We are trying to get to the root of what happened. I know the girls have been told not to share more information to members of the public, but of course we have more questions than the answers. But anyway, those two have been sentenced to life in prison. What am I talking about? Let's zoom into that story that made headline in our news yesterday.
Public anxiety is over as the long-awaited judgment in the case where 13 girls were abducted by two self-confessed convicts in Lusaka's Chalala area between March and October 2022 has been passed. Were treated to a bizarre incident as what began as a missing person incident later culminated in the abduction of 13 girls. James Mulenga, 22, and Matthew Sikaonga, 21, confessed to 54 counts of attempted abduction, rape, abduction, abduction of a child, aggravated assault with intent to steal, assault occasioning actual bodily harm, and assault causing grievous harm. Following their confession to the crime, the Lusaka High Court has since found them guilty. Judge Charles Kafunda sentenced James and Matthews to life imprisonment with hard labor. Judge Kafunda has also handed out a 50-year jail sentence for all rape counts in relation to 11 victims. In their mitigation, on June 22, 2023, the two confessed masterminds of the bizarre incident said they committed the evil acts against their victims, who among them were former high school classmates, just for pleasure and out of foolishness, as they did not know that what they termed as ukwangala would turn out to be serious. They pleaded for the court to be lenient in meting out punishment by imposing a rehabilitative sentence, unlike a custodial sentence, as cases of abduction were not common among youths in the early stages of adulthood. During mitigation, the victims explained that their partners deserted them following the abduction and they are finding it hard to maintain cherished relations. In the reports by the psychosocial counselor, they submit that as a result of trauma, the victims feel socially excluded and have been experiencing challenges in their relations. YWCA also concluded that the victims were likely to be affected in their education and career prospects, but Judge Kafunda notes that the convicts lack compassion and remorse for the offenses they committed. In his findings, Judge Kafunda says the convicts well calculated their moves in abducting the victims, making the offense preconceived. Meanwhile, speaking shortly after judgment was passed, many stakeholders advised the citizens to treat gender-based violence cases seriously.
Women, whichever age, they just keep on attacking women. This is unacceptable, and you should know that the law will come after you, and you also get sentencing like the way these two abductors got their sentencing. So take this as a serious warning.
On the legal aspect, this case is also very novel in that we're able to use victim impact statements for the first time. So it's also setting a judicial precedent. So we are happy that justice is served, and we're just hoping that the collaborative efforts that we've been working on together on this team can continue to ensure that the girls receive healing and restorative justice as well.
Two people that are a menace to women are behind bars. We are especially elected with the life sentences that have been meted to them. And we hope this is a warning to other young people who think it is a game. The issue of gender-based violence is not a game, it's a serious game.
Among the victims, one was heavily pregnant. 200 days of hostage was the longest, where they suffered physical mental abuse, poor nutrition, forced alcohol abuse, and forced family planning pills. Nelson Zulu for Camnet News, Lusaka.
There you have it, abductors in for it, for committing the offenses they committed and without showing remorse for their action. I'm left wondering, you know, you kidnap people, you calculate the moves, and among them there is even a woman who's pregnant. You have no remorse for the child she was bearing and the pain that that woman was going through, and you keep locking them up, you keep raping them, you keep beating them, you keep torturing them. I don't know where this country was going, but never again in the history of this country should we experience a traumatizing activity for that. If those are your children, imagine the trauma that they might have gone through. So those two are in for it. They've been slapped with life sentence, and they've also been handed 50-year jail sentence for all the rape counts in relation to all the victims. So for each victim they raped, they've been handed a 50-year life jail sentence, which they will serve concurrent. This is actually sad, and this story, remember, when it came out, it did leave the country traumatized. We don't know the motive for their kidnapping, and you know, as a country, I think we deserve more answers. What was the motive? Was it human trafficking? Where were they destined for? You know, giving out this information sometimes does help us, or does help one person who might be a victim to know, to say, you know, if you find yourself in this situation, this is what it means. But we have, of course, more questions than answers with particular to that story that made headline in our news yesterday. And of course, that made headlines a few months ago in almost all the media platforms when it was reported that the 13 girls, or rather 12 victims, were found. And we, of course, wish them a quick recovery. I know it's a traumatizing incident, but if you're watching this program, we love you. Zambia does love you. We wish you a quick recovery from all the trauma. And remember, there is light at the end of the tunnel. You can still get yourself back together and live a normal, happy lifestyle. So that was one of the news that made headline in our news yesterday. But also remember, over a couple of months or years or days, months, weeks, years, we have been having an issue when it comes to shortage of medicines in health facilities. Almost everywhere you go, all the time, you will be told that the only thing that is happening is that you pass a prescription. So what government did is that in the budget they were given for 2022 and 2023, remember they give the money, that was part of that money that was reserved for the procurement of medicines. So government did go to these manufacturing companies in India, where they paid 28 million United States dollars for the procurement of drugs. So this is what usually happens. When you want to buy drugs from other countries, it's not that you go and you find shelves where there are medicines and you say, okay, give me that, pack me that, and then we import to our country. No. When you make an order to say, we want these particular medicines, that's when that particular pharmaceutical company in that country will begin to manufacture medicines for you. So because of the number of how much you've requested, you realize that sometimes it takes a lot of time. It can take maybe a month, 2 or 3 months for those medicines to, completely be manufactured by that company. And then there is also a process of packing and shipping them to Zambia, which takes some time. So Zambia did procure medicines from India, and yesterday we did witness the arrival of these medicines. Not all the 52,000 kits, we ordered 52,000 kits, but yesterday we did see the second consignment of 700 kits reaching the country. So what this means now is that today, these medicines are starting to be sent in all the parts of the country. Naimobaku Shangombo, in the rural deep clinic that is in Shangombo, will be able to receive medicines. So we are hoping this intervention that has been done by the government is going to allow the country have enough stock. In addition to that, what will be happening now is that every 2 months, government will be receiving 7,000 kits of these medicines. Every 2 months, 42,000. This way, we are going to help deal with the issue of being given prescriptions rather than you being given medicines when you go to health facility. I think it is a plus, and kudos to the UPND administration. So yesterday, actually, I was there to witness about the 16 trucks that had come from India. They were offloading these medicines and they are stocking them at Zamra. Remember Zamra, that's where we have a storage for medicine. So they are stocking them there. After they stock them, they calculate, they do what now today. They're starting to send them to areas where they need to go. So for the next 12 months, medicine has been catered for in the country, because from now on, every 2 months until 12 months, we will be receiving these medicines. I think it is a plus for government. We need to give them a hand for that. And then also, we've got other companies like the USAID and others who've come in also there will be help in Zambia in terms of procuring medicines to ensure that we have medicines in health facilities. But when we say medicines, it's not all the medicines, because medicines are a lot in the country, But essential medicines, we know we need the Panadols, the Piriton. It's very disappointing. You go to the clinic, even Piriton, you're being told to go and buy. Piriton, no, go and buy. I think never again should we go back to such situations in our country again. So yesterday we did witness that, and I say kudos to you, the UPND administration. So let's see this story that made headline in our news yesterday, where government was just unbundling these medicines that have come in. Let's see this.
The continuous shortage of medicines in health facilities will soon be a thing of the past, as 7,000 health center kits out of 42,000 bulk purchases made from India have already arrived in the country and is ready for disbursement effective Friday, 30th of June, 2023. A check at the Zambia Medicines and Medical Suppliers Agency ZAMSA warehouse in Lusaka on Thursday found the health kits being offloaded into the warehouse. And the Ministry of Health Permanent Secretary Administration, Professor Christopher Simonga, says the 7,000 health center kits will be distributed to all parts of the country and is optimistic that the current shortage of essential medicines will be a thing of the past.
Distribution of these health center kits commences tomorrow, 30th of June 2023. It is at this point I also request the general public to participate in reporting any suspected theft of these kits and indeed any other essential health commodities. The plan of receiving these kits every after 2 months is an impressive and strategic approach which will guarantee an uninterrupted supply chain, ensuring that the people of Zambia receive the quality health care as close to their homes as possible.
Meanwhile, ZAMSA board chairperson Dr. Anna Chifungula says the government will every 2 months going forward be receiving the health center kits for the next 12 months until all the 42 kits are delivered in the country.
So in total now we have received 7,050 kits that have come. And every 2 months we are going to receive another 7,000. Which means that for the next year, our health centers, we praise God, will be catered for.
Meanwhile, all the health center kits have been labeled GRZ, and Dr. Chifungula has appealed to the members of the general public to report any private institution that will be selling medicines labeled GRZ.
Here it says GRZ. Yeah. So when you see a box like this at a private institution, please sound the alarm. All these are labeled GRZ. There is that label at the corner. Maybe it looks too small, but all of them have that kind of label. Too much leakage of these medicines to unauthorized facilities is happening. So please.
And this container is typical of our products. There's no other container like this in the essential supply chain. So you see this container, please notify us as well. But sometimes people remove the sticker.
The one who went to India together with the whole group, and I witnessed the packing of the kits in India. Even here, I've witnessed. So this shows that our government is waiting.
The medicines have been procured at a cost of 28 million United States dollars, and many Zambians await to see the medicines reach health facilities to reduce on the number of prescriptions being given to patients. Prudence Chota, reporting for Camnet TV News.
If you hear me breathe like that, it is a sign of relief for that mother, child in Shangopo district or in rural areas who for many years have been given prescriptions. We hope, and it is our hope as Zambia that those medicines will actually reach those intended, destinations. Issues of pilferage and stuff like that. I think if you remember just 2 months ago, we did cover a story where, some health kits were confiscated from one of the drivers' homes, you know, the people who are sometimes tasked to move these medicines were actually, you know, pilfering these medicines, and altogether they were they had a cost of about 2.4 million. So they had, you know, COVID-19 testing kits, the Panadol, the gloves, the shine, they store everything, and they were stocking them somewhere. And then when one member of the public saw that, he said, I think this is unfair. They went and reported, and you know, that person was nabbed. He was nabbed with one of the health officials and one of the maid, you know, these ones who clean, the cleaners and the driver, and one health personnel were brought in. You remember, look at 2.4 million worth of medicines. That's a lot to save the entire, you know, rural area. But you know, we see issues of pilfering continue to happen in the country, and we hope this time strict measures will be put in place to ensure that those medicines reach the intended beneficiaries. But of course, we appreciate that effort that government has put in to ensure that, you know, they receive enough medicine stock to last the country at least some good 2 months. And by the time that medicine will be finishing, another bundle will be coming in. We will continue to monitor the coming in of these bundles of medicines, because, you know, as a country, we have a lot to achieve when it comes to the health sector. So that was one of the stories that made headline in our news yesterday. So even as we allow our guests to come in and settle, we are going to zoom into one of the last stories that made headline in our news yesterday, and this is regarding Zambia's debt. Remember, today's topic of discussion is unbundling the debt restructuring deal. What does it mean for the country? So yesterday, the Economics Association of Zambia held a meeting, or rather they held a symposium or a forum, where they invited the Minister of Finance and National Planning, Dr. Stumbeko Msokotwane, and other people from the ministry to come and give us a presentation what this means. So we had the Secretary to the Treasury, Felix Nkulukusa, say Zambia is expecting a cancellation of its debt owed to the private sector. They are expecting at least half or part of the debt owed to the private sector to be cancelled. But you might be wondering to say, they've given us an extension. But what are you talking about to a journalist when you say they are expecting an haircut? This is what we will be discussing shortly when we invite our guests to settle. So speaking during the Joint Government and Economics Association of Zambia EAZ Forum on Debt Restructuring and IMF Program in Lusaka Thursday, Mr. Nkulukusa says the Zambian government has asked the private creditors to write off some of its debt in an announcement to be made next week. He says the only way that Zambia will be able to pay back its debt owed to the private sector is either by haircut or extension of the maturity period, as is the case with the bilateral creditors. Meanwhile, Finance and National Planning Minister Dr. Stumbeko Msokotwane says government is in the process of executing a memorandum of understanding with the Official Creditors Committee, which will outline the terms of the debt treatment. I know some people have been asking to say, but it passed a debt treatment, but what are the terms and conditions? So we are only able to know the terms and conditions when government signs a memorandum of understanding with these official creditors. What that also means is immediately they sign the memorandum of understanding, the International Monetary Fund will be able to release $1.88 million that they are supposed to give to Zambia, but they've not been able to do that. Why? Because we agreed that IMF package which they gave us, the 1.3 billion, remember, they were supposed to be giving us in installments. The first installment they gave us, but the condition that was attached to the second installment was that before they release it, Zambia needed to sign an MOU with the creditors. The only way Zambia was going to sign an MOU with the creditors is if they came to a debt restructuring deal. So this process has delayed because of, the negotiations, but luckily we've signed a deal. So after signing a deal now, we need to sign an MOU with the official creditors so that the IMF can release the 188 million to Zambia, and then we are going to channel that money towards the implementation of the national budget. Let's zoom into that story that made headline in our news yesterday.
Since the announcement that Zambia had clinched a deal with the bilateral creditors to have $6.3 billion United States dollars of its debt restructured, the debt restructuring process has raised more questions on its importance and how it will benefit the Zambian economy. Secretary to the Treasury, Felix Nkulukusa, who made a presentation at the Joint Government and Economics Association of Zambia EAZ Forum on Debt Restructuring and the IMF Program, has labored to explain the importance of the debt restructuring process and what it means for the Zambian people.
Because we are not paying, it's not that we are better off. that was sitting on our books. And one day, someone was going to ask for that money. And if they asked for that money today, it meant that today we should release the $4.6 billion. And if we fail, it means that everyone stops lending it to us because they cannot lend into arrears. It means what our colleagues in Zimbabwe went through just a few years ago would go through the same route. And up to now, we know that Zimbabwe's currency cannot even perform.
The Secretary to the Treasury also says Zambia is expecting a haircut from the private creditors on its debt in an announcement to be made next week.
And that, I think, was even asked in Parliament. What is so good about the deal? Because it will make us pay. Because we are not paying, we are accumulating arrears, 4.6 billion. And from December 2022, we didn't have any standstill clause. The only reason each of our creditors did not come to pounce on us was because they believed that we were on the right track and we were doing the right thing and there was no need to punish us. But any one of them could have come and pounced on us.
And the Finance Minister, Dr. Situmbe Komsokotwane, who spoke at the same forum, says Zambian government is now expecting to sign an MOU with the bilateral creditors, which will outline the much expected terms of the debt treatment.
We have had this hump. Most of this debt was supposed to be paid in the next 4 or 5 years, and it was impossible. By now, we'll be paying something like $2.5 billion every year in debt service, which we don't have. That is just for the official creditors, I believe. So, yes, part of the answer is to reschedule, of course, with grace period. But on top of that also, interest rates will be lower than before. The effect of rescheduling and low interest rates means that, in fact, the value of the debt goes down by roughly about 40%.
And the Economics Association of Zambia is optimistic that debt restructuring will lead to Zambia's economic recovery.
PMRC, Zika, please, let's utilize these so that we can have a concerted approach towards enhancing our fortunes to develop this country.
Prudence Chota, reporting for Camnet TV News.
There you have it. That was the Secretary to the Treasury, Felix Nkulukusa there. The Finance Minister, Dr. Situmbe Komsokotwane, just updated members of the public on what this IMF, rather the debt restructuring process, really means for Zambia. A lot of questions have been raised, a lot of comments on social media. We do see some people argue to say, this was not the best deal that the country should have entered into. But yesterday we did see the Secretary to the Treasury give us some of the hints of why they feel this is the best deal. Among the things that Mr. Nkulukusa did mention is the fact that if we did not pay, it was just a matter of time before the people we owe money pounced on the country. I am quite, asking myself, so what would have happened? The pouncing, would have they come and Zambia from Africa and they thrown it into the Indian Ocean? I don't know what that pouncing means. Perhaps maybe when I have a conversation with Mr. Nkulukusa, I would like to know those pouncing. What does it mean? Were they going to come and take over the offices at the Ministry of Finance? Perhaps we could have waited to see what could have happened. Hey, but remember, all that sometimes leads to the collapse of an economy. We did see Mr. Nkulukusa make reference to Zimbabwe. Remember, when Zimbabwe failed to pay, there are a number of things that happened. Among them, their currency became so weak to an extent. Today, if you see the way the Zimbabwean kwacha behaves, it is quite a sad situation. We've seen a lot happening in Zimbabwe, to high inflation rates, to other things, lack of, I think sometimes they even didn't have bread in the country. Bread was fetching as high as 30 kwacha to 40 kwacha in Zimbabwe. That is the Zambian kwacha. So a lot of things sometimes happen if you don't negotiate. That's why it's important when you have issues, you sit down and negotiate. But remember, we are talking about two types of creditors. We have the bilateral creditors and we have the private creditors. When we talk about bilateral, we talk about the private creditors. What are we talking about? In studio this morning, I am joined by the CSO Debt Alliance, Civil Society Organization Debt Alliance economist, Mr. Emmanuel Zulu, to help us discuss unbundling the debt restructuring deal. What does it mean for Zambia? Mr. Zulu, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you very much for having me.
It's good to have you on set this morning. I know last time we couldn't host you because you were not feeling too good.
Oh yes, but I think we managed.
Yeah, we did have quite a good conversation. Yeah, but today we are hoping now to unbundle this issue. I know there's been a lot of, celebration.
Yes.
On the other hand, we've seen there are some critiques that are coming in on this issue, are saying it's not something to celebrate about. So, we've been having mixed feelings on this particular topic.
Yes.
And I'm hoping today we can just talk a little bit about unbundling this animal called, debt restructuring. To the bilateral creditors, to the official creditors, what are we talking about? And then what are the significance of this issue on the Zambian economy? We're going to look at both the positive and the negative part of this, because to every coin, there are two sides. That's what they say,
Yes.
We can't be rejoicing, but maybe there is some aspect that we are ignoring. So just to dive into the conversation, you too can be part of the conversation. Those watching us in the comfort of your home or on your different gadgets or platforms, you can be part of the conversation this morning. But unfortunately, today our phone lines are not coming through, so you can't call us. But that does not deter us from having a conversation. On our Facebook page, you can go to Camnet TV. This program is being streamed live, and you can leave us that message. Hopefully, before the end of the conversation, we will be able to respond to some of those questions. Unbundling the debt restructuring deal. Mr. Zulu, let me get to you. When we talk about debt restructuring, this name, debt restructuring, what are we talking about? What is the meaning of debt restructuring? Just to begin the conversation.
Thank you so much for that question. I believe it's a question that is hanging in many people's minds. We've taken this conversation at a high level. Mostly, I think we are technocrats and probably people that get
everyone is a technocrat.
Understand the debt restructuring, and they don't really we haven't really gotten to break it down even to a layman understanding. I think I really appreciate that question in the first place. So when we talk about debt restructuring, we must first take cognizance that there is a debt that you have, and as Zambia we had this unsustainable debt that we were owing to different types of lenders. You did mention there were bilateral lenders and there are also private lenders.
We're going to come to that, so that
of course. Yeah, different. Having domestic lenders, we also have domestic debt. So when you put this debt together, it became so unsustainable to the level where we are not able to service the debt and also meet, budget demands internally, and grow the economy. So you reach a level where you are choked, so to say, and your income cannot support the debt service requirement. So you end up defaulting, of which we did in that was 2020, just post the COVID. I think 2019, 2020, we did default on a Eurobond payment. That just indicated how distressed we were as a country. So now when you're talking about debt restructuring, it means now you are bringing it to the table of the creditors that you are actually in a distressed position, and you need this debt to be rearranged to a state where you can actually have some space to breathe, or maybe some fiscal space for you to be able to support growth within your economy, and at the same time maybe pay a little than you were supposed to pay towards debt. So you are trying to rearrange the debt, which may actually entail, interest cuts. Maybe you cut down on the interest. Also, forgiveness, where you want part of the debt to be forgiven. That is also part of debt restructuring. And also the deferment of the payment period, or rescheduling the payment period. Probably your debt was supposed to be repaid, like in our case, you find that some debts were due just within the space of 5 years, but now you get to negotiate where you extend the payment period to 20 years, that gives you room to pay smaller amounts. So that means that you are now restructuring your debt. If the interest that you were supposed to be paying was, let's say, 5-7%. You now have 2.5% interest. It means you've rescheduled, you've actually restructured your debt. And so if part of the debt probably is forgiven, you've also restructured the debt. So you haven't really gotten the whole debt forgiveness per se, but you've restructured it. The state in which it is now, it gives you some fiscal space for you to reorganize yourself and have capacity to pay it and also to grow your economy as a country. So you've actually made some changes to the state or the nature of the debt or the composition of the debt, if I can also add that.
Interesting conversation there. When we talk about debt, we know that Zambia owes. We've got bilateral creditors, we've got the private creditors, and we've got the domestic debt. So just talking about this, Zambia has signed a debt restructuring deal with the bilateral creditors. And now Zambia is yet to engage the private creditors on the debts that we owe them. Who are the bilateral creditors? Who are the private creditors? And in this case, when we talk about domestic debt, what are we talking about? So just explain for us what bilateral creditors mean, private creditors, and domestic creditors.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm glad you've rightly categorized them in that way. So we also have, multilateral debt.
Multilateral, yeah.
Yes, that is also owed to multilateral institutions such as the World Bank and, the IMF. So just to answer your question, Zambia has got a debt mountain of over 30 billion United States dollars. That is both domestic debt and external debt. So under domestic debt, basically you look at the debt that the government owes through, we can talk about bonds and treasury bills and all that. So that is the debt owed domestically to domestic players, and also to foreign investors that probably have bought bonds in the Zambian government. So that is also part of the domestic debt. Yes. Then external debt, of course, that is owed debt that is owed to external players, financial lenders, and when you talk of external debt, this is now where you have bilateral debt that is not the government to government debt, and also debt that is backed by government. It could be maybe you got from an institution from maybe China, but it was backed by government, so that also forms part of the bilateral debt. So that is basically what bilateral debt is. Then when you talk of private or commercial debt, this is where you go around the commercial market and also get to borrow from commercial players, private lenders, if I can use that word. We have debt such as the Eurobond, those are private players on the market that can get to lend you money. You have, other institutions within China. I think one of the debts that was actually we thought would be part of the bilateral debt was actually singled out to be, a commercial debt, so that type of debt is actually what forms, the private debt or the commercial debt. And usually it's priced, depends whatever terms you get to agree. Sometimes it has high interest rates, because it's private players, they're in for business and they're in for money. It's different, especially when you look at it from the comparison of bilateral debt and the commercial debt. Sometimes on a government-to-government deal, you get to have some flexible negotiations and flexible deal, as well as also when you look at multilateral debt, usually it's highly concessional and the interest rates sometimes are even zero. So you have those differences that they get to exist between these types of debt.
We did carry a story earlier this week, I think it should have been on a Tuesday, where we talked to some community members on what they understand about this debt restructuring deal. And most of them were saying, if we don't even know what this thing is, when they say debt restructuring deal, we don't even understand, and now it affects us. All we know if is that if in $2 oh, life na ikosa. So when you talk about, you know, these things for us, we don't really even see the significance. And tapai na bale to not what this means. If I $2 So what is the significance of this debt restructuring deal on the Zambian economy? When you reach this deal now, what is its significance on the economy? And of course, on those who are saying we don't even know how this deal is going to impact us.
Very important observation there, and I should agree with you that quite a number of people do not really get to understand the details, you know, around this debt restructuring, and it's very important to actually categorize what type of debt we've reached a deal on. You know, this is the debt under the OCC, Official Creditors Committee. You know, that was actually sitting and trying to give Zambia a deal. So they have agreed on a deal. We haven't yet signed, you know, the actual, you know, agreements with these bilateral lenders, but they have agreed on, maybe I can call it an umbrella principle, which will govern the negotiations as we engage these, you know, creditors themselves, the bilateral lenders. So they have agreed that we'll actually be given some space in terms of payment of the debt that we are owing. That is 3 years. We will not pay the principal. We'll only pay the interest, and the interest will be paid at 2.5%. You know, so that means that instead of the actual interest that you are supposed to be paying as a country, you actually pay the 2.5%. That is the cap that has been put. And then for the next 3 years, you only pay that interest, meaning that you are actually relieved from actually paying the principal and the interest, meaning that the monies that you should have been paying towards this debt, as you know, the total debt service amount will have actually reduced, meaning that you now have resources available within the country to use for you to actually impact the economy positively. You can actually get to invest in the economy, to grow the economy. And probably, just to answer your question, these people that may be asking to say, we're just hearing about this debt restructuring because things are still going up. Definitely it is to your benefit, because had we not gone through this process, definitely it meant that Zambia was going to actually channel, I think, over, if you look at the budget for 2021, about over 50% was actually allocated towards debt servicing. So imagine now that you even have arrears and all that, but we would have actually been channeling more than that towards debt servicing. Now that you have some resources available, you might actually have, you know, monies channels towards social spending. You know, free education needs to be supported, allocation towards CDF needs to be done, unit to drugs in the hospital. All those require resources. So if the government was constrained in terms of resources that are meant towards social spending as well as investment, you as an ordinary citizen was going to have challenges to actually find those drugs in the hospitals, because most of the monies that government was collecting was going to be channeled towards debt servicing. So this restructuring gets to help you as a citizen to ensure that the government has resources to procure drugs, ensure that they provide that free education that your children are benefiting from, and as well as invest in sectors that can actually get to produce goods and increase output. Probably with increased output on the market, you might actually even get to see some of the commodity prices get to be reduced. And just on that, Prudence, the debt restructuring also gives relief, if you look at it on the money market aspect, because with a huge amount of debt servicing that was needed, you look at our debt, it's actually denoted in the United States dollar. So you have to pay in the dollar. So meaning that when the debt falls due, the government will need to gobble the dollar around, you know, and collect as much dollars as possible and pay that debt. What does that do? It actually strains the strength of your currency, if I can use a simpler term, because you actually increase demand for the United States dollar. So you see that your currency gets to be weaker and weaker and weaker. So with reduced stress, you expect some form of stability. Even the cost of imports now, things that you procure outside the country gets to be cheaper. Or maybe you get to have some kind of stability in the exchange rate. Yeah, even manufacturers are now able to predict and calculate their, their costs and their pricing. There is some kind of stability that is brought in the economy. So even the ordinary citizens will get to benefit from that stability on the foreign exchange market, where you will not see prices of goods rising, because currently we're still there, but I think with the progress that has been made, there is some form of stability being instilled in the economy. So we get to have that price stability as well, even as ordinary citizens. We might not see that, those volatilities in terms of pricing. Even the inflation rate itself gets to be controlled or maybe stabilized.
Wonderful explanation there. This morning we are unbundling the debt restructuring deal. Remember, Zambia did reach a deal with the official creditors to have 6.3 billion of its debt extended over a period of 20 years. In the first 3 years, we will be paying nothing, but only the interest. Remember, you go to a bank, you get money, Mr. Zodi.
Yes.
Okay, interest, yeah, 30% of what you borrowed, yes. But because we were not also paying, the interest even went higher. Yes. So they say, okay, in 3 years you are first, you'll be paying us the interest at 2.5. That's what you said, half of that. Yes. And then after 3 years, that's when you can start giving us this money at 1.5% over a period of 20 years. There's that extension that has been given. And of course, we are expecting to see some money in the economy that we are going to reinvest. I've heard arguments from some people saying, what are the terms and conditions attached to this agreement? Zambia, or maybe the government, is just excited because they know that when they sign this deal with the official creditors, the IMF will be able to give them the money that they are supposed to, because we are on an IMF program. So others have argued to say, the IMF program was not even the best thing that we should have entered into as a country. What is the significance of this IMF bailout package that has been given to Zambia?
First of all, we must understand that even the creditors themselves were not even going to agree to give us this restructuring deal without, being on this IMF program. Actually, it was a requirement that we have to be on that program. So the IMF program gives confidence even to the creditors that we are actually on a path of fiscal prudence in terms of even how we manage our resources, and they're actually there to monitor that Zambia actually employs fiscal discipline in the way it manages resources and ensures that we meet certain benchmarks that were required by the creditors for us to get this debt restructuring deal. So they have actually been very supportive to this program, and they were very essential for Zambia's attainment of this deal. You must understand that they are considered as an independent body that was going to actually give an objective debt sustainability analysis, which they did, and they provided that Zambia was actually debt distressed. If you look at the debt sustainability analysis report that was conducted by the IMF and the World Bank, it is on that basis that we actually got to starting to even look for relief in terms of debt relief. They actually provided the amount of debt relief that Zambia was actually in need of based on that debt sustainability analysis. And we cannot say they were not a vital party to our debt restructuring deal. So they have been very supportive. After that, we were able to actually go now on an extended credit facility that provided, a 38-year relief. That is, 38 months relief. That is under the extended credit facility, which gave us the 1.3 billion under the special drawing rights. So that itself, that is the money also that we actually pushed in the economy. Even as we were in that debt distress position, because in that position, we were not even going to get a loan anyway. We were actually in default state. So you can imagine the things have to run, the economy has to run, people need jobs, the government needs to employ, certain facilities need to be provided, and also there was also need, for the balance of payment support.
Mr. Zulu, some people have argued to say, I know you've said we're not going to borrow. Some people have argued to say, but why should we borrow as a country when we have all these natural resources? We can raise our own money and support our own budgets.
Well, it is, you can argue, like they say in economics, I followed, Mr.
Nkulukusa's statement.
Yes, that there's no wrong answer or correct answer. It's how you argue, you put forward your argument. Yeah, but we have resources quite all right, but you look at the urgency of the matter. And I've always argued to say, it's like someone who is bleeding, I think you need, first aid, so to stop the bleeding. I think that is what this program actually provided. That relief, that 1.3 billion was actually a great relief in terms of also helping us restore, macroeconomic stability, and also try to foster growth even in that period as we are yet to have the debt restructuring deal reached. So I think when you talk of resources, quite all right, we are realizing revenue, but because of that debt, we cannot realize as much revenue as we should because of reduced investor confidence.
Is it necessary for Zambia to borrow?
It is. It is, and I must say that we cannot have all the resources because of the principle or basic economics principle that resources are scarce and needs are limitless. So you cannot have all the resources. So hence the borrowing comes in. So I don't think even America itself, as much as it is a developed country, it has debts. So we cannot say it wasn't necessary to borrow. The borrowing was done, yes, but also it has to be responsible borrowing. So right now, what we are doing is we are trying to now treat this debt that was accumulated irresponsibly, if I can use that word, irresponsibly, because if you look at the trends, Prudence, how the debt grew, you would agree with my word of irresponsible borrowing.
No, I do agree with you because I remember the first Eurobond that was borrowed. Remember, there were 3 sectors that were targeted for that money. And one of the sector was the railway sector. But for now, this is 13 years down the line. We've seen totally nothing happen in the railway sector. So I do agree with you when you say, sometimes the money, we did not say, especially the first Eurobond.
Yes.
It's like, we don't even know where the money has gone, but we have to pay back.
So you see that in a space of, I think that was just 3 years, we got 3 Eurobonds. Just within 3 years.
Wow. If we don't pay back, what could have happened to the country? I think I remember one time attending a meeting by, these, of course, the CSOs.
Yes.
I remember attending a meeting with one of the CSOs, and they were arguing to say, you know what, let's not pay back the debt. If they want, let's just leave it the way it is. It's better we don't pay off than getting on the IMF package. I think that's the time we were negotiating with the IMF, and there were arguments to say, in as much as we don't pay, it's not like, someone is going to take the country away from us. No, we don't have the money, and they have to wait until the point when we have the money, then we'll be able to pay back. So for now, let's not go the IMF way, because IMF is what has been causing poverty in most African countries, because there is no country where you can point to say IMF developed. So let's not pay, let's not get on the IMF bailout package. What are the effects of us not paying back the debt?
I think we saw the effects of not paying back the debt. First of all, you have reduced investment flow. You don't have foreign direct investment coming in your country, meaning your people will not have jobs, meaning that even your growth that you anticipate to achieve you may actually struggle to achieve that growth itself, because growth and investment also come hand in hand, because you need to invest for you to grow the economy. And then also you look at other aspects such as your exchange rate, your currency. It weakens because you are not producing. You're not producing enough. As much as people may argue to say, no, we should have not paid, well, that dent of the debt itself painted a bad picture in the sight of investment. You might actually even see even the little investment that you have shifting away from your economy, which actually Zambia was experiencing. Even if you look at the bonds, there was low subscription to the bonds. So where are you going to get the revenue to even execute what you're supposed to execute as a country? Because you will agree with me, just in this pace of 3 years, past 3 years, we were not servicing the external debt because of that suspension, debt service suspension, So there was, despite not servicing the debt, we were actually stressed as a country because of that debt mountain that was still there, unsustainable debt. Investment was actually affected. Our currency was affected, meaning that as much as you want to create jobs for the people, as much as you want to grow the economy, your growth level is affected. Unemployment levels get to be so high. Your exchange rate actually, your currency becomes weaker, and being a net importer, a country that actually is a net importer becomes very, the burden actually becomes very heavy, because now the cost of goods becomes high because of the cost of imports. It becomes very expensive to import raw materials and goods for you to actually produce for your people. So once you import expensive raw materials, definitely the cost of goods will actually get to rise. And the people now will see the cost of living actually shooting.
The one we've been talking about.
We've been in this we've seen it, Prudence. So there's, I think there's very little argument as to why we should not have gone the IMF way. I think I do not agree with that. I think that is the best way, because it wasn't the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is to resolve the debt. So it is a means to an end. So if you look at it in a different sense, it's basically the right channel that Zambia has taken. I know even the previous government, politics aside, even the previous government did attempt to approach IMF, but because they weren't ready to undertake certain reforms, I think that relationship actually did not materialize. But they knew that the debt mountain was actually a dent on Zambia's economy. Even growth prospects were actually dim, And they ended up, I think we had to engage a private credit negotiator, that is Lazard, advisor. And of course, it was still difficult because the creditors, the bilateral creditors, and I think they were more comfortable, dealing with a more credible institution such as the IMF. And you have no option. If your creditors feel this is the best institution that you can deal with, and I think it gives us comfort that the reforms that they will advise will actually result in you paying back the debt later on. I think that gives them comfort to deal with, to go undertake even the debt restructuring process. So IMF comes in as a guarantor, if I can make it simple, to actually give assurance to the creditors, to say we've actually put Zambia on this program, and we are actually monitoring even the reforms that they're undertaking to ensure that they achieve debt sustainability. Hence, you need to also come in and give this relief. So they actually pushed for us to get this deal with the creditors. That is about the 6.3 billion debt that is agreed to be restructured. I must say agreed to be restructured because we haven't yet signed also the individual agreements with each individual creditor. But what we are also trying to achieve also out of this is the restructuring of the private the commercial debt or the private debt, you know, because also they're also looking forward to the parameters that will be set by the official creditors committee, you know, and because of that principle of comparability of treatment, so we actually get to use, they actually expected, the private creditors actually expected to give Zambia the same, you know, relief that has been given by the official creditors committee. So you see the importance of this process. It is an interlinked process that you cannot isolate one party from the whole process.
The topic we are discussing this morning is unbundling the debt restructuring deal. We are joined by Mr. Emmanuel Zulu. He is an economist from the CSO Debt Alliance. We have an alliance that speaks on the issue of debt in the country and is coming from that sector. Talking about debt, Mr. Zulu, we know why we've come here today and why we are discussing, you know, this issue of debt is the fact that we overborrowed and we were unable to pay back. Yes. And others have argued to say, you know, when you borrow, you have to invest these resources in sectors that will help you raise enough money so that you can pay back. We saw the Patriotic Front argue to say, you know, we borrowed and we invested in infrastructure. And you've seen the infrastructure. We've seen the Kenneth Kaunda Airport. We've seen the roads in Lusaka. We saw schools in all the parts of the country. We saw clinics, hospitals. You know, there have been those arguments that have come up to say we overborrowed, and you can see the result of where the borrowing went. Others have argued, on the other hand, to say, if at all you invested in sectors that were beneficial to the country, we could have not defaulted because we could have seen money coming out for us to pay. This brings me to this question. Even as we have been given this debt restructuring deal, and we are expecting some resources to be freed in the economy, which sectors of investment should we be looking at as a country that will help us raise enough revenue to an extent where, remember, we've got an IMF bailout package. In 5 years' time, we need to start paying back. Yeah. And now this debt by the official creditors has been extended. Yes. We'll start paying after 3 years. Yes. It is also getting to, when we get to 5 years, we'll have the IMF, what we have to pay back. We will have the official creditors that we have to pay back. We have the World Bank. Yes. I know we've gotten some loans from the World Bank that we need to start paying back. And all this will require us to generate revenue. So when we talk about investment, in these 3 years we've been given, what sectors should we focus on as a country to invest in to an extent where come 5 years from now, when we'll start paying back all these, we will be able to have enough resources to pay back?
A very good question, I should say, and I'll just go direct to, I think, answering it. In the first place, we already know what our major resource basket is, and that is, you know, revenue from the mines. You know, so, and I think our production levels have gone down of late, and if we can revamp production in the mining sector, I think that is an area that can actually get to contribute greatly to raising resources for actually even repaying the debt. You will agree with me, Prudence, that we have issues with, you know, KCM, which is one of the largest mines that we have, you know, and it hasn't been operating, you know, due to these legal issues of ownership and everything. So we actually need to utilize this period to expedite, you know, operationalizing the KCM, the Konkola copper mine, as well as the Mopani. We actually need to ensure that these two mines within this period get to be operationalized for us to generate revenue. Then just within the mining sector, we have a lot of minerals that are actually on demand currently. We have manganese, we have cobalt, you know. We have gold. Let's not run away from this.
And everywhere where you step your feet, there is gold. It's like now we've got this gold rush in the country. Just last month we did see in Pika.
Yes.
There were stories that definitely.
So you can see that Zambia is not, you know, is actually rich in terms of the mineral resource, and currently there is high demand for some of these minerals that we have, especially with the, you know, coming of the, you know, the electric vehicles. So meaning that already we are looking at a ready market for electric vehicle batteries. And we've already talked about an MOU with Congo DR where we can actually have a plant to start manufacturing these batteries here. I think that is something that needs to be expedited for us to actually be, ready to start paying these debts when they actually start falling due. So I think we have capacity to pay. It's just a matter of, the will, political will, first of all, and also just the government policy direction. I think that is what is key. Then we have the agriculture sector. I think if you ask me today, it is very worrying that we have a lot of land available, arable land. We have, we can grow a lot of our land is actually fertile and we can grow different crops. But if you look at the contribution of agriculture to GDP right now, we're talking of less than 10%, meaning that we haven't actually fully utilized our potential in the agriculture sector. So I think this period will call for massive investment in the agriculture sector. If it means incentivizing production, let us do that. We can actually choose to incentivize, importation of machinery that supporting the growth of the agriculture sector in terms of it contributing significantly to the GDP. I think this is where the revenue actually lies. We have that space, and also we have the tourism sector, which we actually need to, I think, advertise. We have a lot of tourism sites, and this can actually bring in, the much needed revenue that the country needs. So in terms of resources we have, and with this debt dent, I want to call it the debt dent on the economy, being removed slowly, we have now potential to attract investors in the economy. So let us be aggressive in our approach for foreign direct investment in our country. So I think we need to see how we can capacitate ZDA, if at all they need to be capacitated, so that they can work with other ministries, of course, and ensure that even these pledges, we were talking about pledges, I think just recently, the increase in pledges, they get to be actualized. I think that is what is going to see Zambia take on a growth trajectory in terms of economic growth. So that is exactly where the revenues are going to come from, and we are going to be able to pay this debt. But also, we must not forget that we are still on this program that is providing support to the government, the IMF program. We'll still be receiving those tranches of I think we're now yet to receive about 188 million from the IMF after signing the deal. So you can see that the budget still has that support. So as we get more revenue, this will actually get to add up to whatever is already there. Then just to add on, now that we have this program in place, there is also the private lenders that we need to engage. So we also expect that there is some relief that is going to come from the private lenders. So that is also going to give some fiscal space to the economy for the country to actually get to have resources to invest in productive ventures. We've talked of farming blocks. I think the World Bank, we got some money from the World Bank to fund farming blocks. If that can be actualized as soon as possible, I think that will contribute greatly. And then we've been talking about the comprehensive agriculture program. I think it's time that the government actually gives details about that, rolls out what's the plan about the comprehensive agriculture program, so that we see how it can also contribute to revenue generation. Yes, and I've always argued, Prudence, to say that the informal sector is actually very big. And because of the way we've structured our taxation system, probably we are failing to collect revenue from this large pool of the informal sector where there's a lot of trade going on. So with this burden on us to start paying, I think it's high time that we review our taxation system. We have tax reforms that can actually get to maximize revenue collection, even tapping into the informal sector, but at the same time not killing the business entities, because you need the business entities to survive, to actually give you the taxes that you need. So I think these are some of the reforms even recommended by the IMF themselves that we need to undertake in order to enhance revenue generation or mobilization.
Interesting there. This is the Camnet TV Breakfast Show in the morning. This is Friday, and of course I am excited, as I said in my preamble, because we are closing the first quarter of 2023 today. It is the 30th of June, and we are discussing unbundling the debt restructuring deal. We are unbundling this animal called debt restructuring. What is it about? And in studio, of course, I am joined by Mr. Emmanuel Zulu, who is an economist from the CSO Debt Alliance. And of course, a number of aspects and things have been discussed with regards to this. Maybe, Mr. Zulu, as we come to the dying end of the program, before I release you, we have celebrated this thing. We've talked about the positives, and how it will improve the economy. Yes. Let's go on the other side and look at, if we are to look at the negatives of, this whole aspect of us getting on the deal, because I know issues of what is attached to that have come in play. So on your perspective, what are some of maybe the negative aspect of this whole thing that you have observed?
Well, it is a very a tough question, because it's like you are very sick and someone gives you some painkiller, and then someone feels better. But of course, you will have to see the conditions that have been given to you, even as that painkiller was coming, I know there's been a lot of hype because Zambia has been on this path for quite some time. We've seen what the negative consequences of prolonging process of this debt restructuring deal has had on our economy, instability on the economy, uncertainty and the likes. But I looked at that statement that was given by the Minister of Finance. Looking at it, I think what is worrying is that, of course, it provides for adjustments in cases where circumstances change. Yes, you will not get to enjoy this 2.5% forever. You see, for 2020 up to 2043, no. If there are any adjustments that happen within your economy,
if you become a medium capacity carrying,
if your the debt carrying capacity moves from weak to medium, then they will need to review these conditions or this relief that has been given to you. So that is one area where we really need to critically look at, because we are a country that has development goals. We have the 8th National Development Plan, and we have the Vision 2030 to be a middle
prosperous income country.
So when you are talking about 2030, you are basically talking about that is 6 years from now, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe 7 years from
7 years.
So if at all we get to move and grow our economy to a level where our debt carrying capacity moves from weak to medium, the conditions stipulate that there will be changes in terms of the repayment period that has been given. They'll be shortened by 5 years, and also the interest rates themselves, they will have to be revised upwards. So I'm looking at it in the sense that what if we grow to a certain level just past, the threshold of weak debt carrying capacity, then the interest rates again increase, and it gives us another burden, and also the time frame is shortened, meaning that if the time frame is shortened, even your repayment amounts will have to increase. So when this also again get to push us down, So maybe those are some of the areas that we need to interrogate even as we are celebrating this deal, you know. But the earlier we get out of this, debt burden, the better. If we are able to grow our economy and maybe achieve double-digit economic growth and also come out of this state of high risk in terms of our debt position, I think it is better for the future of our country, because currently we've actually shifted the burden to our children that are still growing, 20 years and the likes. It may look, it is some relief, because currently we'll give room for growth, but that growth again will come at a price of paying high interest rates, and also maybe increasing the repayment amount, because you're actually pushing it backwards instead of pushing it forward. If you grow, you will have maybe 5 years rescheduling. It will be reduced by 5 years instead of going up to 2043. There will be that reschedule, so it might also increase the repayment amount. But I hope it will not get to suppress us back into the debt distress position again, because of those changes that may come with our growth. So I hope we stick to our 2030 vision of
becoming a prosperous
yes,
income by that
and
year.
by that year, that means that we'll have to pay high interest and also maybe higher repayment amounts. Of course. So I hope we align properly with our development agenda.
Exactly what you said is what I said. When I read the statement that was released by the Ministry of Finance, I had to go back through that statement over and over, and I'm like, why did they agree to this? Yeah. Why wasn't it constant? But anyway, maybe as we conclude the program, I don't know, maybe I feel, sometimes even when you get a loan from a banker, you get a loan, you have to pay a period of maybe 5 years or 10 years. Sometimes there is that aspect of when you perform very well with that month, you say, let me pay more, so that by repayment period shortens. So maybe just wishing the government all the best as they deliberate on these matters. When they raise enough revenue, maybe instead of extending it, to that period, they can be paying somehow. Instead of complaining, 0.5, and that's okay, this month, right, 0.8.
You see, the aspect of negotiations also does not entirely lie on government itself. It's the creditors themselves, and you still have to, it's the IMF, and they have to do an assessment to see how much you can actually get to pay. So they will assess you and say, no, I think now they are able to pay more than 2.5, they can pay maybe 4.5 interest, or no, I think not 4.5, I think maybe 3.8 interest. You see, so they will still do an assessment for them to determine how much you can pay as interest, and still get to the creditors and get to agree. So you cannot really make a decision. Well, that's where we are in, actually. We cannot make a decision on how much we can pay. It will depend on the level of our growth.
This has been the Breakfast Show. This morning we were unbundling the debt restructuring deal with Mr. Emmanuel Zulu, who is an economist from the CSO Debt Alliance. This civil society organization is comprising of various, CSOs in the country. We've got CDPD, we've got, Oxfam, we've got CATS, we've got NGOCC, we've got all this JCTR, all this you see combine, and they form this CSO Debt Alliance, and they've been prominent in offering checks and balances to the now administration, and of course giving them advice. And I know among the things Mr. Zulu have said is that government should going forward be consultative and more open to these issues, so that we do not fall back to where we were or where we are now, where we have to go and plead for some haircuts and repayment of debt. This is where we have to end the program this morning. For everyone who kept the conversation, thank you so much. I was just checking on Facebook. I've seen some messages there. Good morning, enjoying the conversation. Yes, thank you so much for all those who've tuned in, who've been watching. And of course, we couldn't accept calls today because our phone line is down. But hopefully next time when we appear on the screen, we will be able to have a conversation. So keep it on Camnet. This is the Camnet Breakfast Show, and we have to close. I was your host, Prudence Jota, from my guest, Mr. Emmanuel Zulu, the entire Camnet TV production team, comprising of Elijah Chifita, who was, of course, the director, and of course, Amos Zulu, who was my floor manager this morning. It's bye for now. God bless you, and keep it on Camnet TV. Remember, Camnet TV is not just another channel.